I will leave Jackie to introduce the panelists, but Jackie will be the moderator and I will do the honors of introducing her. Jackie Park leads IPI's work on network strategy and innovation. She's a journalist and editor with deep experience building journalism communities around press freedom and high integrity journalism, particularly in the Asia Pacific. If I can have your attention, please. Thank you. I'll continue with Jackie's bio. She is the Senior Fellow for Media Innovation at the University of Technology, Sydney, and writes a fortnightly newsletter, The Story, on media startups and innovation in Asia Pacific. She was the founding CEO of Australia's Walkley Foundation for Excellence in Journalism, founding Asia Pacific Director for the International Federation of Journalists, and a J.S. Knight Fellow at Stanford University, focusing on media innovation and strategic design. Over to you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you very much, Nompilo. Okay, so buckle up, everyone. In this session, we're going to nut our way through one of the most trickiest questions in journalism, and not just now, but I think for forever. And that is, how do we reach and engage communities that have never really found themselves very well served by the news media? And how can we use the tools of innovation to build a broader ecosystem with the journalism that's more inclusive, engaging, and impactful for the groups that are too often ignored? So the panelists that we have here with me are three of my favourite thinkers on this subject. We're going to try to solve this riddle. So on my far right is Jasmine Acuna, who's the co-founder and editorial director of El Surtidor in Paraguay. And if you haven't taken a look at El Surti, then you're really in for quite a treat, because it's one of the most exciting new media voices with a deeply smart graphical sensibility embedded in the way of their telling stories. Then in my colour orange is Samantha, Samantha Refilwe-Palainen. And Samantha's the co-founder and content producer in Botswana's Inc24 Media, which focuses on deep investigations into stories that matter to their communities, and then ensuring that they have a wide reach, a much wider reach. And then immediately next to me is Shirish Kulkarni, an innovation and inclusion consultant in the UK, formerly with the Local Bureau, and he's currently with BBC News Labs, the network news, to find out how might we tell different stories in different ways to meet the information needs of people who don't currently get or see value from journalism. So nothing too big, right? Okay. So we have about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit less, and I want to open it up to your input as well at the end. So I'll start with Jasmine. So the premise of El Surti has really been to bring a new way of doing journalism to people who were ignored by much of the news media in Paraguay. So who are those people, and how did you do it? What was your mission, and how did you pull it off?
Thank you, Jackie. A real pleasure to be here. I would like to start by telling you how was the state of press freedom in my country, Paraguay, when we started 7 years ago now. It was one characterized by media capture. Not more than 4 powerful economic groups own most media outlets. But what really worried us was that media organizations were not really paying attention to young people. They were not delivering news, keeping in mind their needs. And you could see that in their choices of coverage, formats, and even the platforms where they were publishing. But at the same time, we saw, and we were young back then also, we saw an opportunity in the growth of small newsrooms across Latin America that were mainly digital. So, and news outlets like El Faro from El Salvador really inspire us and show us a way to overcome the issue of media capture and try to speak directly to young people. But of course, we had a challenge. Why would they read us? It was hard to get their attention on the internet. So our answer to that challenge was visual journalism, which we think of as the combination of quality reporting with very powerful graphics that managed to catch their attention. But we also had another challenge, which was poor internet access back then and until now. People in Paraguay mostly access the internet through social media and through their mobile phones. They don't own that much money to own a laptop. So what we have done is we have adapted all of our content for social media, for messenger apps, and for mobile phones. So in that, by doing all of this, we are trying to make sure that we reach young people that were not, that news outlets were not paying that much attention to.
Okay, great. And Samantha, at Inc. 24, at Inc. itself, which is the investigative news outlet, one of the main pillars is actually the deep investigations and stories. And what you're doing at Inc. 24 is really trying to take that out to reach a broader strata of society. So how did you think about this when you set out to make it more accessible? And what was the problem, if you like, that you were trying to solve?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Jackie, for that question. So as you've mentioned that Inc. Center for Investigative Journalism is Botswana's only non-profit donor-funded investigative news outlet. So that focuses on three things: investigative journalism in the public interest, training for journalists, and also advocacy work. So we're seeing that we do long-form reports or investigations, but there were audiences that we're not reaching because of this. Like Jasmine had said, we found out that younger audiences, they have very limited attention spans. You know, they have a focus problem. So we still wanted our investigations to reach such people. So what we did is we started Inc. 24 to say that we are going to attract the age group 15 to 35 and also share with them the investigations, but in shorter formats and also video, because young people are very visual. They don't want to be reading. So if it's in video format, then we grab the attention in that way. Yes.
Yeah, and how are the stories different? So you're using video. The Inc. itself is longer form investigations. Inc. 24 are video, more video format. And how is the content different? Like Inc. is covering corruption, bigger corruption. How do you tell the stories differently?
Okay, so Inc. would cover corruption, human rights abuses, or abuse of state resources, and so on. So what Inc. 24 would do is would show what it means to an individual. If the president is giving tenders to his sister and there's no finances or funds to fund a local clinic, what we do is we would go to a certain village and then show the impacts of that on the local level, you know, bring it down, you know.
At the clinic, so to speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, Shirish, you, in one of our earlier discussions, you talked about that we have this abundance of information, and that's really one of the issues that we're facing. And so it's hard to imagine, though, that in this abundance that there isn't something for everyone. But you've said so much of it can be empty news calories. So what's the gap, and how should journalism think about filling that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, I work in the UK, and we have a very particular news environment in the UK, but I think some of the lessons apply kind of globally. I mean, on one side of things, when we're talking about meeting the needs of people who are badly served by journalism, part of the business model of a lot of the UK industry is to harm and attack those people. And guess what? When you harm and attack people, they're not going to trust you and they're not going to buy your product. Simple, really. And the other thing is, there is a lot of news, but there's not a lot of information. And what I mean by that is, for example, a couple of months ago, the top story on all the websites where I live in Wales was a crash on the highway, motorway, freeway, so many words for roads, in which one person had died. Now, that's what most people regard as news, certainly what most journalists regard as news. But when you think about it, what value does that have? It essentially has zero value. The people that need to know, it's a tragedy, of course, but the people that need to know, actually no one else needs to know, and actually all it does is provide something else which makes think the world is a lot more miserable and grim than it actually is. But actually, why would anyone want to consume that product?
Yeah. And when you talk about news that harms, are you talking about crime, for example? And if I can just offer, because I've, as you all know, like I've been doing a lot of research over the years, talking to a lot of local media in particular, and it's one of the areas that I think some of the most innovative are rethinking how they report on crime. And I think probably at the local bureau you had a very, so you're reporting not the crime, but actually the systemic policing problem, for example.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was actually talking to some people in Sweden about this recently, and they were talking about how there was a big Malmo, there were a lot of bombs in Malmo. And one of the other people said, oh, do you remember they changed the whole way that the police service was run in Sweden about 5 years ago? And no one else knew this. And by chance, all of this crime had arisen when they changed the police service. So is it a crime problem or is it a policing problem? And actually, we see in the UK, all the evidence is it's a policing problem, not a crime problem. But the people who are regarded as the authors of that are the communities most marginalised, most harmed. And talking about the systemic stuff, actually people talk a lot about the system being broken, but the system isn't broken. It's operating in exactly the way it was designed, which is to maintain the power and privilege of people who have power and privilege.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, journalism is part of that system. It's not over here reporting disinterestedly on it. Journalism is part of that system.
So just getting back to this idea of the abundance, right? So we often talk of this challenge as a problem of news avoiders, or in abundance, it's characterised as a problem of attention. And so I just wonder, are we defining the right problem here? Like, is it news avoiders, or is it a problem with the journalism?
I mean, I think the definition is entirely wrong, because all my research has shown is that people are crying out for journalism to make sense of the world for them. And that is the purpose of journalism, right? That's what we're all trying to do. But actually, they look at the journalism which exists in the world, and it does not do that. And because of the business model of journalism, or the kind of historic business model of journalism, journalism does a thing, but it's not that. And actually, the point of newspapers was to have built-in obsolescence, because if you didn't do something that was new on that day, there was no reason for you to buy it. But actually what people want more now is context, a longitudinal view, the systems thinking, because the world doesn't happen where something happens on a day, there's nothing which comes before it and nothing which comes after it. And for example, when we talk about the migration problem, it's defined as a problem in the UK, actually that is a result of a number of systemic things, largely the UK government not processing asylum applications, but we rarely get that in our news coverage because it's news rather than information and context?
Yeah, we're always. I think it's an issue of changing mindsets, right? And if we keep going after breaking news, we're not going to be able to provide the context that new audiences are asking for in a very chaotic and disorganized, world for them.
Yeah, and Samantha, so you know.
Yeah, when Sharish talked about context, I think also with us, it's important that with what the investigations that we do, that we bring them down, so that people are able to say, what does it mean for me? We hear you're talking about all these big things, but what does it mean for me as an individual? Yes, so it is important that we don't leave our audiences out of the work that we do. At Inc24, I'm proud to say that even though we're a small team, it's made up of young people. So when I say that we are producing content for young people, it is done by young people. We don't assume from our high towers what young people need. We are there with them, working with them and saying, okay, if I was a reader, this is how I would like to hear about this. Yes.
And how do you do that in a sort of nuts and bolts sense? Like, who tells the stories? Because that's what I'm hearing is important.
Yes, it is the young people. We also work with freelancers in the four corners of the country. So in that way, we don't get to miss anything. So if it's a certain community, we have that freelancer who is living in that community, and they're able to tell or report in a more nuanced way. Yes, because they're there. We don't come in from the city and think, oh, this is what's going on. Yeah.
So reaching audiences, and I guess one of the more recent jobs that you might see in journalism is community organising, right? So how does that actually work? Like, if you can unpack that, maybe starting with you, Jasmine, and what impact does it have on your journalism? How does it shape it?
I love this topic, by the way, because I've been thinking a lot about it recently. To start with, I think community organizing is about trying to confront some of the most pressing issues that we have, like polarization, divisive discourse, rising levels of online violence, disinformation, and a growing distrust towards media. And if you look at all of this, all of that happens on the internet as well. So I think that these issues are also symptomatic of a very profound need that people have for deeper connections. And I think that journalists can facilitate those connections. So community organizing in journalism for us is about understanding that today anyone can have an audience, but it's much more important to build communities around the quality information that we're providing. And it's much more valuable to have communities that can act upon that information. And to us, and for us, it's as simple as opening up spaces to meet members of our audience. We have invited them to fact check with us. We have gathered with them to dig into historical archives, to register state violations against campesino and indigenous women. It's about really reaching out, and that's not gonna happen online. It's about getting offline and getting away from conversations that are driven by platform algorithms that we cannot even control. It's about activating civic spaces and safe spaces for dialogue with them, and trying to feel a sense of purpose and belonging that people are looking for. People need that, and you can see it when you actually get away from the screen and try to distribute your information beyond social media as well. And I'm talking, I run a digital news organization, and one of the biggest lessons that we have had in the past years is that it's not enough to publish the truth. We need to take more steps.
Fascinating. Shirish, what about your experience with the local bureau?
Yeah, so when I worked at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, I was employed as a community organizer rather than as a journalist. And I completely agree with everything Heston said. And so I can give you a practical example of the power of it, which is we were very aware that there was a growing problem around insecure and precarious work in the UK. And so we did a call out for regular people to just send in their ideas for stories we should investigate. And we got around 90 applications, just, and we made it very light touch, 200 words, just an idea. We never used the word pitch, because that's a journalism word. And then we picked with our partners, who are ITV News and the Mirror, the newspaper, we picked 10 of the most promising ideas. We then brought them all together in person for an ideas lab to work together, like all the 10 people, to get to 3 ideas which they thought would be the most successful. We then did those ideas, and they produced some of the most successful stories the Bureau has ever done. And the reason for that is the most successful was a story we did around the pay of Deliveroo riders. So if you don't know Deliveroo, it's a food delivery service, and they pay very badly, but very opaquely. And the reason we got that to work was because it relied on Deliveroo riders sending in their invoices to us. Now, if as journalists, we'd said, send us your invoices, nothing to worry about, not a problem, it'll be totally fine, we would have got 0 invoices. But because the idea came from Deliveroo riders, we were working with them, we got hundreds of those invoices and showed that people were getting paid £1 a day, which is not very much. And because it came out the day before the Deliveroo flotation, it took quite a lot of money off the Deliveroo flotation. But that is a story we could not have done as journalists. A, we wouldn't have had the idea. B, we couldn't have built the trust.
Okay.
So for us, community organizing has a lot to do with including our audience's priorities, or aligning our priorities with the audiences, you know what I mean? And in this way we build trust and even more meaningful relationships, okay? And richer and diverse perspectives are also gotten out from community organizing, yeah.
And it seems like, trust is something we talk a lot about now, right, in journalism, and it sounds pretty central to all of the things that you are doing. Are there any other kind of lessons that, anything you've learned along the way of building trust through your work that you could share?
Okay. People always want to know who is behind that story, So our newsroom is quite open, and people are free to come in and, by appointment, of course, to come in and see who are these people behind this, And like I said, that with the freelancers in all four corners of the country, they know this is somebody who's with us, who's living with us in this community. Mm-hmm. Yes. So in that way, we kind of have, we build a credibility. Yes, yeah.
I wanted to go back to you mentioned information abundance, and I think that, we have to deal with trolls and populists and extremists online and a lot of disinformation. But journalists are still the only ones left with the one fundamental democratic duty, which is to hold powerful people to account. So our challenge now is to actually show that there's value in that to new audiences. And something that we have learned is that innovation in journalism is about what we can learn now from other mediums, formats, and even art genres that they do so well at capturing people's attention, and what can we learn from songs, movies, comics, video games, that can improve also our abilities to reach people. At El Surti, yes, when we talk about visual journalism, we talk about quality reporting, but we're also talking about beautiful, jazzy, and sometimes even humorous images and graphics that we get from pop culture, memes. We use a lot of memes in our reporting, just to try to establish a deeper connection with our readers. And that's I think, very important, and it's one of the things that we have learned also.
Picking up on what both Samantha and Jasmine have said, I mean, the thing is, I was doing a panel about news avoidance a couple of days ago with Benjamin Toff, who works at the Reuters Institute, and he described the groups of people who are the most news avoidant. And I realized, basically, it's the opposite of the types of people that work in newsrooms. And those two things are not unrelated. And in a way, I wanted to address the tiny elephant in the room, which is the title of this panel, which is Walking in the Shoes of Others. Because it makes me think, am I the others? Like, yeah, Procter & Gamble and Unilever, when they're talking about selling soap powder, don't talk about others, they talk about consumers, right? If they want to sell a product, it's literally othering people. And this is the big problem in the journalism industry, right? So actually, if we're thinking about others, then we're getting it wrong to start off with. And actually, that's not a problem I can solve for newsrooms, right? Newsrooms have to reflect on, who's in the room, who's making those choices, and maybe think about where there might be different people who could do that.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll open it up in a moment, so maybe we can start to get the mics around. Just what can you share about what you have learnt about the innovations in the journalism, either the journalism or the way we're getting it out, we're reaching audiences? Samantha, tell us about the QR codes.
Oh, okay.
That's one thing I love.
Okay, so we are living in a time where we constantly have to be innovative, so that we don't lose our audiences, right? We need them. So what we are planning for us in the future, not in the so distant future, is to have everyone read our stories by having these QR codes set up in places where people generally congregate, like your bus stations, your clinics, at the universities, at schools, where you can just scan the code, and then you get to watch a short video from Inc. 24. We have been fortunate that some members of our team have been outside Africa and have studied there, so they see what it is that other people were doing in other parts of the world, and we're able to bring home, and we're able to bring home some of these innovations and make them work in our context, because there are no two places that are the same. We're a population of 2.2 million. So when we say that we distribute our content on WhatsApp, literally, if we share something right now, the next person is going to share it with somebody, the next person, and so on and so forth. So this strategy works for us because of our smaller number, but it might not work for Jasmine because of that population. You know what I mean? Yes, so we do what works in our context. Yeah.
So you're using WhatsApp to distribute?
Yes.
You too?
Yeah. So,
Primarily WhatsApp?
no, not primarily we're all in all social media
Right.
and yeah, but primarily WhatsApp when it comes to messenger apps, because it's the one that's most used in Paraguay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're all talking about as well is, actually, people get obsessed about formats and the shiny new thing, and we're going to do this on Instagram, or we're going to do this on TikTok, and that's not the thing. Because the things which do well on TikTok and Instagram, for example, are things which explain. And we could be doing that journalism wherever we do it. It's not the platform which is the thing. It's actually the fundamental journalism we're doing and actually meeting the needs of the people who are. And like I say, I don't like the word news avoidance because it puts the blame on the consumer. And actually, what I think of them as frustrated sense seekers. They're looking for sense to be made of the world, and they're not getting it. So if we realign the journalism towards sense-making, rather than whatever it is that the journalism industry does now, and I think increasingly with subscription models, and the programmatic advertising model has collapsed, we know that. So we actually need to build genuine loyalty, genuine engagement, and actually that sense-making role is where that's going.
And I think both Inc24 and El Sorti have your business model bouncing off this kind of understanding and reaching your audiences, right?
Yeah, we have set up a communications unit where we provide communication services to other organizations, even firms who are very intrigued by the way we manage to talk to young people. So that has become now a new source of revenues for our news organization. We have a team exclusively devoted for that work. Journalists don't get involved in that. And we have also exported, we have also taught other newsrooms our methodology, because they have become very interested in trying to reach new audiences, and they have found our methodology an effective way to do that. Yeah, there's business in there too.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's also the same with us. Because of the talent and the quality of our documentaries. We have major corporations such as banks, your trade unions. They will engage us on the side to do their own companies' documentaries. This helps put the lights on, and so I think we'll continue that way. Yeah.
Questions, comments? You know what? Sharing. Katerina, first.
It's actually two questions for you, Jasmine. The first is about the WhatsApp group that you lead, and a little bit more on that. Can you explain the nuts and bolts, as Jackie said? And the second question is, you said that you did this communication services for other teams. Are the teams completely separated? How do you deal with that?
And can we take one more question from Francois, and then we can do them together? Is there any other questions in the room or comments to take now? Okay, put them with that.
My name is Francois from Ivory Coast. When the different panelists were talking, I heard the sentence, who is behind this? Who is behind that? I think the same question is everywhere in all the African countries. I'm taking an example of Ivory Coast, where the technology is growing, but most of the young people in the different areas don't know how to use these technologies, for example. And instead of using the technology for creating opportunities, they use it to create trouble. And when we saw this kind of experiences, we have decided to create a small radio, online radio, but to educate young people. But young people in the rural areas, how can you educate them? Is when they feel that they have opportunities with this radio station. So we go toward some non-governmental organizations to ask them to what extent is possible for them to help young in rural areas for the creation of vegetable field, for example. And when they find that they receive or they get financial support for their own activities, when the radio team gets in this village for, a public broadcast, all the villages around, and even they call other people to say, yes, the radio station is now a village today, and come for this broadcast. And we start by agricultural area before joining, talking about another thing. That's for answering this question, most of the time people think that there is a politician, there is someone, a businessman behind the different production of small radio station or newsroom. But it forwards or it's opportunities that most of the time created by the owner, the young people. It just gets an idea of, innovation that can permit really to do big and good things. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So Jasmine, and then I think we'll move through with final comments and answering the question.
Yeah, so your last question. Our newsroom is completely separate from the team that's in charge of providing communication services. That team has learned our methodology. It's similar to the newsroom in the sense that it also has writers, designers, and illustrators. Our newsroom has reporters, designers, and illustrators. So those are completely separate. And then your question about WhatsApp. We pack our journalism in JPEG files, which are very easy to share and read and understand. And we share those on our WhatsApp channel. We have now 7,000 members, subscribers to our WhatsApp channel. It's not an easy task to send those files because WhatsApp puts a lot of barriers, of course, because of disinformation. They think we're also disinforming. But we have a person that's in charge of that. And we have also changed the use of WhatsApp according to the context. During the pandemic, a lot of this information was in audio format. So we started doing podcasts, very short podcasts, where we also try to fact check that disinformation, and we distributed our short weekly podcast on WhatsApp. So we also change how we use that channel, and it also helps us, have better conversations with members. For sure, it's different. Yeah. There is, yeah. There is a moderator.
For us, we don't. The same team that does the news is the same team that does the documentaries for the major corporations. So, because we're a very small team, yes. But that doesn't mean that the next day we cannot write about them.
I just wanted to reflect on Francois's point because I think it's really important. And again, like a sort of nuts and bolts answer. When I was at the Bureau, we started something called the People's Newsroom Initiative, which started from a listening exercise, actually, where people across the country told us, well, actually, journalists have had their chance and, frankly, messed it up the last 50 or 100 years in representing our stories. So we want to tell our own stories, or at least for you to share the space with us. And then we sort of set up a program where we wanted to make it possible for people to tell their own stories. And we did a bit of training, but as a second module of that training, we did what Jackie talked about earlier. We did a systems thinking module. And the WhatsApp group absolutely lit up after that, because suddenly they saw how journalism could be a positive force in their life rather than a negative force in their life. And we have to remember, for these people, for people I work with, journalism is more a negative force in their life than it's a positive force in their lives. And those groups, without lots and lots of support, have all gone on to use journalism in lots of different ways. One of them has a radio show, one of them does a magazine, one of them is doing video journalism, because they see the power of journalism. So I don't sit here criticizing the industry of journalism, but journalism is incredibly powerful in achieving change, and that is what they need. Change, because the world is not dealing them good hands. So actually it's about creating change.
Okay, I think we covered everything. Are there any final thoughts anyone wants to share? No, I think you're all here for the next day, so if anyone wants to follow up with conversations, but it's been incredible to really unpack all of your different experiences and models, and share so many lessons about how we really kind of use our journalism to reach really deeply into our communities and have impact, right? So Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you.